It's a little better.
A little bit.
A little bit. I think you're louder than the microphone.
Yeah.
He's got to do it for 50 minutes.
So thanks for allowing me to come talk. This is a great presentation group here. I love this. I've already got some comments that excite me because I do feel in the medical field that I'm in the minority. I know there's some doctors out there that support it. Doctors, a lot of them that are employed by hospitals are kind of handicapped. They're not allowed to say anything outside of what the hospital allows them to say. As Brownie and Nancy will tell you, I have no problem saying what I feel and what I think. Gets me in trouble every once in a while, but that comes with territory. So, I added pictures, so if I get boring, it's not interesting. This is Grand Teton National Park pictures I've taken out there, so y'all can just look at those pictures. So who I am, Lanier Family Healthcare, Victory Direct Care, and Orris Vein Center. Those are the three practices I have here. So we're here to talk about natural immunity and COVID-19 and its relationship. And if we have time, we'll talk about, which I think we will, it shouldn't be a problem, talk about the heart in COVID-19 with myocarditis, the side effects from that. So natural immunity, there's two basic responses. The humoral response, that's where, let me back up. The phagocytes, as a foreign substance enters the body, the macrophages or the phagocytes grab it, take it in, chew it up, and expose parts of that to the outside of the cell. And that exposed part is seen by the CD4 or the T helper cells. And the T helper cells makes little outpouchings or out to basically signals to other cells. If you go down the cellular response, cytotoxic T cells recognize this and it knows what cells to attack. And it basically attacks and kills the cell. Simple. That's the cellular response. The humoral response, the T helper cells tell the B cells what to do. And the B cells rapidly start making antibodies that go out and try to kill and attach to the foreign substance and bind it together and kill it also. So next, there's two types of immune presentations. You've got the upper airway response, which is mainly IgA mediated. And the virus gets into the mucosa of the nose, nasopharynx, and tries to penetrate through the mucosa. And as it does, it stimulates an immune response. The Omicron variant was much more contagious, spread a lot easier, but it has more difficulty penetrating through the mucosa. And so most of the Omicron cases weren't as bad as Delta. People are with runny nose, sore throat, cough, maybe a little fever, a much milder case. The amount of virus that, the viral load that's present makes a difference in what kind of infection you get. That's one of the reasons I did use ivermectin. It suppresses viral replication. So it makes a bigger viral presentation a much smaller one. So the gastrointestinal tract, the virus can be swallowed and stimulate an immune response with T and B cells in the GI tract. Now, it doesn't mean you have to eat it necessarily. If it's still in the nasal mucosa and drains down the back of your throat, that gets swallowed. It still gets to the GI tract. That stimulates an IgG response, which is a little more aggressive and potentially could set off what's called the cytokine storm. That's where your body almost gets an aggressive inflammatory response that gets out of control. And that's why you really want to try to suppress and keep that from happening, because that's what can lead to a lot of the lung damage in patients that end up on the ventilator. Symptoms down this way is high fever, shortness of breath, and inflammation. So now this, I hope this works. This is a little video here. This is the coronavirus. These are the spike proteins on the outside. These are the ACE receptors that in your body, that's how it gets into the body. It finds those receptors and penetrates through. So it will show how this gets into your body. There's a picture of a phagocyte actually grabbing it, and you'll see it engulf it and then destroy it, and then it presents the spike proteins to the outside of the cell so that other cells recognize what the bad guys are. And at the end, I think it's showing the B cells where it's making antibodies, reproducing rapidly, making antibodies, releasing them into the bloodstream, and at the same time, it has it on the outside of their cells too. So, oh. There's the phagocyte. Medical illustration is amazing to me.
Was that in real time on the X-ray?
Yes. So these are the cytotoxic cells, the blue one here. So it recognizes the antibodies on the outside and then destroys them. And the B cells, the plasma cells, making the antibodies and releasing them. All right. Whew, that worked better than I thought it was. Me and technology do not get along. Things just never seem to work when I want them to. So this is going back to humoral response with the antibody. So over here is the initial presentation of the, we'll say coronavirus. And so as the B cells are set up, they're making the antibodies. And within, usually it's about 7 days, you're making a sufficient amount of antibodies to suppress or control the virus. And then you Igg and IgM antibodies. The Igg is the longer term antibody, where IgM is short term. They don't last very long. And so as the infection suppresses, it doesn't go back to zero. There's still some memory B cells present. And they go hide in the bone marrow and stay there and wait for the next time. And so in the next infection, as you can see, that took 0 to 7 days. This is 0 to 3 days and gets a higher level of antibody response. So it really helps to jump on this thing the second time. And to me, this is a real important fact that some of our government agencies ignore. And this is Hidden Falls, again, in Grand Teton National Park. That water was cold. So next, in the journal Nature, they looked, this is a year ago, actually almost a year and a half ago, in 2020, they looked at T cells in individuals and found that a large number of patients had T cells from the coronavirus, the SARS virus, from 2002 to 2003. So that's a big thing that everybody was saying we don't know how long it's going to last. The antibodies aren't going to last very long. Natural infection doesn't work. Taiwan was bragging about how great they did at suppressing COVID-19 when it came out. They didn't do anything different than anybody else did. So why was it really suppressed? A lot of us believe it's because they got hit so hard back in 2002, 2003 that a lot of their population already had those memory B cells sitting waiting for this new coronavirus to show up and jumped on it early. And other studies, part of this study showed the CD4, which as I showed, the T helper cells, are 90% of the patients at least 6 to 8 months afterwards. So, where does that leave us with the vaccine? So now I'm going to start getting ugly. In June of 2021, less than a year ago, Peter Marks, quote, "We do know that immunity after vaccination is better than the immunity after natural infection." Dr. Walensky, the director of the CDC, "Even if you've had the virus," and this aggravates me, "you should get the vaccine 90 days later to get sufficient immunity. Getting the virus alone is not enough." And all this was coming out when they're pushing these mandates, and it just frustrates you. From the current CDC website, the fact, getting a COVID-19 vaccine is safer and more dependable way to build immunity to COVID-19 than getting sick with COVID-19. The only part of that I agree with is to get the immunity to the virus, other than the vaccine, you have to get the infection. Yes, there is some risk with that. And so that's why I would agree that it's safer in that sense. Yeah, there you go, very little. So the second one, COVID-19 vaccines do not create or cause variants. That's true, it does not do that. But it can help prevent new variants from emerging. No better than, because you still get it, you can still transmit it. And I have an interesting study to show about that in a minute too. So natural immunity, again, versus COVID-19. Spike proteins are these red splotchy looking things here. RNA, viral genome, membrane protein, envelope protein, nucleocapsid protein. The COVID-19 vaccine was made to that alone. They say it may be reacting with another component, but that's it. If you get immunity because you had the virus, there are 22 epitopes that your body reacts to. 22, not one, maybe two, 22. So what does that mean, really? It means that what happens if the spike protein changes, like going from Delta to Omicron. That was the big difference, is the spike protein change. So if the vaccine is designed to a spike protein 2 years ago, how effective is it going to be today when the spike proteins changed? If someone had the infection 2 years ago, they had 22 epitopes that if the spike protein changes completely, one of these other components, your body's going to recognize it as foreign and it's going to attack it. So that's a strong, strong point about natural immunity versus the vaccine. To me, the vaccine is obsolete at this point. Robert Clancy, who is an immunologist down in Australia, I was watching a documentary about him, and it really was kind of scary. You've had the two vaccines. They waned going into the Delta variant and became less effective. So we got the booster, which is what's the booster? It's the original vaccine to the spike protein. So they said that that's supposed to help boost that, and it would last 3 to 4 months. The next booster comes along. He said it may last 8, maybe 10 weeks. The next booster may only last 4 to 5 weeks. But what happens with those boosters each time? Anybody ever had allergy shots? If you've had them, what was your allergy shot to? I shouldn't ask you that. I'm sorry, it's HIPAA. So we'll say bee stings. You went and got allergy shots to bee stings. We give you a series of little doses of that, and you become less reactive. It doesn't work as much. So what happens after all these booster shots, and you get COVID again? Your immunity doesn't even stop. It doesn't do anything. It ignores it. That's devastating. I can't imagine what that infection would look like. It would be short, and it wouldn't last very long. I'll put it that way. Regeneron, a monoclonal antibody that we were using, designed for the spike protein. It did a great job with the Delta variant. It has been proven Regeneron, the monoclonal antibody, does not work on Omicron. So they admit spike proteins changed enough that this monoclonal antibody won't work. But hey, get that booster. It's contradictory. It doesn't make sense to me. So, natural immunity versus COVID-19. Sorry, CDC and FDA. There's the 6 studies that prove natural immunity is better. But then there's another study, one from the CDC. This is January 19th of this year. They produced documentation proving natural immunity is better than the vaccine. And so this is a graph, very, very confusing the way that they did it. But the blue line, if you can't read that, the blue line is unvaccinated people. And this vertical line is not numbers. It's a hazard rate. What the heck's a hazard rate? It's laboratory confirmed COVID-19 cases per 100,000 person days. That helps clear it up completely. I'm trying to understand what they're trying to reference. But the reference, I agree that there probably is a greater number of people supposedly getting the vaccine. This is Delta variant. This is from May 30th to November 20th. So this is all Delta. Maybe a little trailing some Alpha or Lambda at the beginning of it. The blue dashed line is vaccinated. They've gotten at least 2 vaccines. The number of cases. This is just cases in California. It's interesting they picked California and New York as the 2 states. If you look way down here, there is a black dash line and a gray dash line. Those 2 lines, one of them is The unvaccinated is the gray one, unvaccinated with a previous infection. The black one is vaccinated with previous infection. Let me give you a close-up. Which one's better? Neither. It's identical. So you're trying to tell me, CDC, that it doesn't matter if you've had the vaccine, it's whether or not you've had the virus. Now, I do want to stress, the people that got to this study, if they've had a previous infection, at least survived that infection. We don't know how many people died from it. And you know, that's a whole different topic, trying to get on that, so, and some of the treatment that was done. So this one is for New York. Same time frame, same hazard rate, but again, we've got the top graph is the unvaccinated, no previous infection, vaccinated, no previous infection, and then vaccinated or unvaccinated with previous infection. And again, those are pretty much the same. And even looking at this is hospitalizations back in California. And still, those numbers are pretty much the same. A study done, I'm pretty sure this was an Israeli study, that showed initially, this is during the Delta variant, or changes after the Delta variant, take that back. So if you got the vaccine after the Delta variant, your protection went down 14%, 14 times. Went down, because that's the waning vaccine. The antibodies just don't last. Unless you get that booster, it's going to boost that alpha variant. But if you got the COVID vaccine virus and no vaccine, you had 25 times the protection. And then if you got both the vaccine and the virus, you had 23 times the vaccine. Why did that go down if the vaccine is so great? And Walensky wants us to get that after having the virus. These questions we must ask. So is this vaccine working 2 years after the pandemic? Love this graph. I love this because, this table, I love this because this is from February of this year to March of this year. It's looking at recent cases. This is all Omicron, So, look, we'll start with 18-year-olds old. This is one that presented to the emergency department and got admitted in the hospital. Under 18, 658 cases, 575 were not vaccinated. So, a large number of them that end up being hospitalized in that age group were unvaccinated. Let's go to, let's say, the 50 to 59. 601 total cases, 110 unvaccinated. What is that, 20%? Not good at math either, no. 20%, so 80% that got admitted were vaccinated. Again, this is the vaccine trying to treat Omicron with a different spike protein. And they wonder why it's not working. 80 and over. 2,000 cases admitted, only 103 were unvaccinated. And 1,700, almost 1,800 had two shots plus at least one booster.
Wow.
This table, when I saw this, I was astounded. I couldn't believe that there's still any discussion about this at all at this point. So, you know, again, looking at the hospitalizations, at least the CDC came out and admitted this, that 40% of those admitted, 43%, actually weren't there because they had COVID. So that tells me, even though they're making these hospitalizations look like they're so bad, 40% of them were there, and if they weren't there because of COVID, it means they tested them after they got there. They didn't treat them, they didn't do anything about them, so it was an insignificant infection. And so, again, and this is even CNN, believe it or not. And so, I wasn't supposed to say anything political. Was that kind of political?
No,
Okay.
they're not a news organization.
So, and this is another graph. COVID, this is deaths. And so, under 18, there were 2. 1 was not vaccinated. 1 was vaccinated. Less than 21 days. I'd like to see the results of that autopsy. There was a kid in North Georgia. I heard this report on WSB News. There was no question. This kid died from the coronavirus. 13 years old. Coroner, yes, on my investigation, this child died from the coronavirus. They went on to give the history. His dad went in to wake him up for school and found him dead. That's not how you die from coronavirus. It's a slower, progressive process. That's how you die from the vaccine. And it's unfortunate. My son had a classmate of his at Georgia that died. And we didn't confirm it, but one of his fraternity brothers said that he thought he had just been vaccinated shortly before that. For his new job, he was just starting. And so again, 80 and over, 1,500 cases, almost 1,600 deaths, only 102 of them were unvaccinated. 1,200 of them had at least 3 doses of the vaccine. So there were also comments made about, and this wasn't that long ago, unless you were hospitalized, you didn't make enough antibodies to protect you against a future infection. Well, here's some numbers. Symptomatic previous infection gives you 93% protection. Asymptomatic protection, still 86%. That's pretty darn good. So, should I get another booster? It's the same original vaccine, making antibodies to a 2-year-old spike protein. If a patient walked into my office and said, I would like to get the flu vaccine, this is perfect. I've got last year's flu vaccine. It's 30% off. Are you going to accept that? Please say no. It doesn't make sense to me. If it's outdated, it's outdated. The science needs to keep up with the virus. If you get a booster every 4 months, and this is what I mentioned earlier, T suppressor cells can actually lower your immune response to the virus. So they said, well, it all has to do with your age. Well, you're right. Older folks don't necessarily build as big immune response to the vaccine, but they've been shown to build as good a response to younger folks to the virus. That's a moose. My daughter took that picture in Cascade Canyon. He was actually on this side of the river, and she just got scared out of her wits and was able to get a picture of him walking away. I thought that was pretty cool. What about this type of vaccine? A genetic or messenger RNA vaccine versus an antigen-based attenuated or dead. Attenuated means basically we take, like the flu vaccine, we take the flu, we break its legs, and then we inject it into it. It can't hurt you, but yet the body parts are there for you to make the antibodies to. With the genetic vaccine, we inject that into you, just like the video I showed. It showed the virus going in and showing its RNA going through and replicating. We don't know where it goes. We can't control where it goes. We can't control how much it makes the spike proteins. And that's where a lot of the problems are. And I'll be honest, I'm scared of this vaccine. And I've argued with other doctors about it. It's safe. It's clearly safe. I said, what about next year? Well, it's going to be safe. I said, you don't know that. We don't know that. And I begged my kids not to get it. My daughter didn't. My son, who's in medical school, said that he was pressured into it. And I told him I would write letters, I would go talk to the president, I would do whatever I wanted to. He said it was the hospital required. If he was going to go see patients, he had to get vaccinated. So far so good, but I still hate it because I don't know what's going to happen down the road. But with the antigen or the protein that we inject, like the flu shot, it's not going to cause the flu. It might make you feel like you got the flu, but that's just your immune response responding. But it will not cause more flu. It will not destroy cells because it gets in your body unless you're allergic to one of the components of it. So there's 2 approaches to COVID-19 treatment. The CDC, the FDA, and our current president and administration say treat the entire population the same way. And that's what a lot of the people, this herd immunity type concept. If we could just get everybody vaccinated, then, or at least 80% of the people vaccinated, it's going to stop the spread. Well, the theory was that if you got vaccinated, you wouldn't spread the virus. That's been proven wrong. And so the whole theory of this herd immunity with the vaccine did not work. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. For certain people, the diabetics, the heart disease, anybody that's got risk to them, you know what? and I'll sit down with my patient. Actually, this is my next topic here. The other thing, which this really I feel is very true, we're smarter than the rest of you, so do as you're told, or else. And that's what I felt like with the media they were doing. They were scaring people into getting it. And even, I mean, doctors, the way they responded to this, I'm still amazed. And I felt like, am I wrong or right? And I feel now the evidence is starting to support at least where my stance has been. So my version is treat each patient individually. And what I like to do is sit down with a patient and say, okay, you're an insulin-dependent diabetic, you've got lung disease, you've had a heart attack, it might be a good idea that you get the vaccine. But I'm going to leave it to them. That's, you know, I'm not a big hand holder. I'm going to present you the facts and the information. I'm going to give my opinion if you want it. That's my job. Risk versus benefits, present that to you, not to tell you. I had patients come to me and said they came to me as a new patient because their last doctor told them, stupid is as stupid does. How do you say that to a patient? But that's what they said when the patient refused to get the vaccine. So, like I said, I'm not anti-vax, I'm pro-education. A patient should be able to make their own choice, not be mandated to them. All right, so the heart versus COVID-19. And I will be honest, there's no question that there's cases where the vaccine can attack the heart, and it's been shown in younger male adults. But the virus can do damage also. I haven't seen or heard of as many cases of that, and I think a lot of the heart things that we see is due to the stress from low oxygen or the stress from just having a bad infection is where the problems come from the heart, not necessarily directly a direct effect. So this is, I don't know if y'all can see what it says here, but this is the heart, the myocardium here, pericardium is on the outside. But myocarditis can be very deadly. Viruses can cause it, any vaccine can actually set this off. But it's most common in kids, as far as kids are concerned, to be from viruses. Almost all the cases we see are virus related. And so that's one of the things is the SARS-CoV-2 can attack the myocardium directly, binding to receptor cells, entering the cells and doing damage there. It can do it indirectly by causing an inflammatory response in the myocardium, or even causing blood clots to form, which, as we've seen, is a big side effect from the vaccine too. But the virus can do that also, causing damage. And these complications can cause the myocardium to weaken and progress. Now here is a comment, really the most important comment on here, and it's talking about the CDC report. Although the overall risk was low, the data translate the risk of myocarditis that is more than 30 times higher among COVID-19 patients. But that also applies. Actually, I saw where one study said it was 130 times higher in vaccinated people. And so, I mean, this is what causes the sudden death in these young kids. You know, the heart just shuts down, causes arrhythmias, abnormal rhythms, heart can't pump, and they die. And so the next is a graph that shows this is the Pfizer vaccine and Moderna vaccine. And so Moderna didn't get its pediatric approval till later, so that's why it has fewer numbers here. But if you look at the Pfizer one, this is 20, we'll say 24, 25 through here. From that point on, it's not as much. It's kind of about the same level. But between 12 and say 23, especially with the median of 16, those are pretty high numbers. And this is from the vaccination. This isn't from the virus. And so,
Those are AEs, those are adverse effects.
What is it showing?
this case is myocarditis.
Heart attacks in kids.
My problem with this, why are we giving 12 to 25-year-olds the vaccine anyway? You know, could something bad happen with them from the virus? Yeah, it could. But the numbers are incredibly low. And I think I looked this past fall, there were like 22 kids under the age of 18 that had died from the virus in the first 2 years, year and a half. And so that's 22 too many, I agree. But how many of them really died from the vaccine? And what were the kids, what were their underlying, they have underlying medical problems? Did they have asthma? Did they have something else going on that contributed to it? I don't know that. That information wasn't given. But it's just the risk outweigh it too much, in my opinion. So in persons younger than 30, the symptoms that can be seen can be chest pain, shortness of breath, and this is troponin. That's a blood test done in the emergency department. EKG can be abnormal, abnormal MRI, and abnormal echo. And unfortunately, some of these changes can be permanent. And that's why you hate to see these things happen to an 18-year-old. Why did you have the vaccine in the first place, kind of thing. But, you know, some people are pushing it. So, all right, next.
They couldn't get a job without it.
What's that, sir?
They couldn't get a job without it.
Well, unfortunately, that's even more embarrassing, in my opinion. Why are businesses pushing medical concepts that have no basis to it? But I'm going to make you all suffer for 1 second, okay, after this next slide. This is a commercial I did, and I hope it works. I don't know if you can hear it. And Gary. Get the word out on Victory Direct Care. You pay a set monthly fee, and we take care of you. We customize your health care, so you only pay for what you need. So that's my take on Liberty Mutual. I think I didn't do any, what do they call that, marketing or
Sales pitch?
yeah, whatever that stole something. So, any questions?
You should use that commercial in the Super Bowl.
Yes, sir.
I'm at the facts, guys. Sorry. So for the two charts you put up there, did they put in numbers for what percentages of each of those population groups already had the vaccine? So like when it was above 80 and there were 2 people that died or 100 people that died that had the vaccine, what was the percentage of people that had the vaccine as well? I mean, was that provided?
Well, no, it gave whether you had 1, 2, or more than, or 3 or more, but not whether or not it had previous infections.
Well, right now I'm also talking about though the percentage of the population, that population group. If it looked at like the overall, like, was it 40% of the population that got the vaccine in that age group? So,
Oh, I didn't get that information. Sorry.
And then the other one was, if you go back a few slides to the doctor quote, underneath it actually says that they exclude any information from people that actually already had the vaccine. Right there, underneath where you have the first quote. So it says the study reviewed health encounters at more than 900 hospitals and excluded any patients who had received the COVID-19 vaccine. So it's a partial study because it doesn't actually grab all the data. And then for these studies, do they actually release the data as well, or is it just the results?
They are supposed to. And the FDA, I mean, that's a big stink with the FDA right now. Because, and I love their comment that it was going to take 75 years for them to release all their information while they approved the vaccine. But they approved it in 4 months. How is that possible? So yeah, the CDC is supposed to be releasing all their information, but they're not. And this is actually the most I've seen from them against what they've been promoting with that study in general.
Would you address the mRNA for a moment as far as what that can do to a person, or what your thoughts are on that area?
The answer, my answer,
Yeah.
who knows? We really don't.
That's what my point is.
And that's what scares me the most. And that was one of my arguments with some of the physicians. They're telling me, I did a video last September, I think, talking, and they made it sound like I was telling everybody not to get the vaccine. That's not what I said. I said, just think about it before getting it. And he was criticizing me for telling people not to get a very safe vaccine. And my argument to him was, like I said earlier, what happens next year or the year after that? And what if the facts that we've got so far, the facts, aren't really facts? And gradually they're coming out that what they were saying before is not true, and that natural immunity is better. So we know it can affect the brain, it can affect the heart, it can affect the bone marrow. I had a patient come in with blood clots from their groin down to their feet in both legs, vaccine 3 weeks earlier. I haven't seen blood clots in both legs in an active guy. This wasn't somebody bedridden. And so, I mean, and I had a patient that died because his platelet count went to basically 0. And he was 2 weeks earlier, he'd gotten the vaccine.
I've heard of young people having their menopause kick in, things like that. Not young, but I mean, in their 30s.
Women, right?
Well,
Yes.
Okay, so, recently a friend's child, 6-year-old, I'm seeing this, hearing this, MIS, multi-system inflammatory,
Uh-huh.
Anyway, 3 days after vaccine. She had had a COVID infection at Christmas, and before 3 months were up, she was pushed to get the vaccine. She got the vaccine 3 days later, and they're denying that it's necessarily the vaccine. They're saying, well, she had COVID. It's probably from when she had COVID. But my point is that the number thrown out there when I looked up was that only 7% of the cases of MIS they're seeing are from the vaccine.
Mhm.
But the question is, what's the percentage of vaccinated kids and what's the percentage of unvaccinated kids? Because if 93%, right? I mean, would that make sense? You need to know.
93% vaccinated?
No. They're saying that of the MIS cases.
Oh,
This
okay.
is what, when I put that out there and said, this is ridiculous. This is happening. They said, well, only 7% of the cases of MIS they're seeing are from vaccinated kids. But if it's 7% of 10 kids, a small number of kids,
Yeah.
but 93% of the millions of kids that aren't vaccinated,
Right.
then you're looking at a really significant thing. Do you know anything about those numbers, what they're seeing, the reality?
No.
What you're seeing?
And part of the problem is the VAERS system altogether.
Yeah.
And actually, I saw a study that said they estimate it's 1% of what's real. I was astounded by that number.
Well, it's passive. That's what I was seeing here in this passive reporting system. I think it's in this one, isn't it? Wait, I saw it somewhere. It was even saying the passive reporting.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
I have not
passive
reported to VAERS before, but
Yeah.
apparently it's not easy. And the doctors just they just don't do it. Yes, sir.
Why did they develop this type of vaccine at this time? Was it because they couldn't get the information about?
Part of it is the coronavirus. It's a booger. It changes very quickly, very easily. And so it's just...
So they didn't do the
Trying to. Novavax is trying to. But they keep getting roadblocks. And, I mean, they were ready to be approved. I want to say it's been at least the summer, this past August, I think. And they have met nothing but roadblocks ever since. And they're the traditional, the attenuated or
Yes.
dead. I don't know which one they were using, but it's actual parts. It's not a messenger RNA.
So
Messenger RNA vaccines failed every test prior to this.
So they did it because it just changed too quickly?
Money.
That's a lot.
That's why they did it.
That's why they couldn't. That's why it's harder to do that.
Okay.
And so, as you can also see, the mRNA didn't work either because it outpaced that. A couple of variants later, and it's worthless. And so that's the problem. And the flu is not as bad, but it changes on a regular basis also. So, yes, ma'am.
You said you recommended the vaccine for people that is doing insulin, that are diabetics and they're doing insulin. What about people that is diabetic and they're only taking metformin?
I mean, it depends on their age, what their other risk factors are. I would be more inclined to not offer the vaccine. And again, I want it to be your choice. And my job is to do risk and benefits. Your risk, being a diabetic, is higher. Is it a lot higher? You know, I've had a lot of diabetics survive it without any problem.
Well, actually, I did survive. Miss Ashley and her husband are witnesses that I was really sick in January, and they actually was going to put me in a ventilator. I couldn't. I had the COVID in my lungs, and I had pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
And I signed a paper to get out of the hospital because I didn't want to do the intubated.
Good.
And I went home and I said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to die in my house.
So
and I'm
did you?
still here.
She identifies as dead. Yeah.
And I didn't die yet. Then I don't have the vaccine either.
I did have a patient, and other doctors would probably criticize me for this, has COPD. She's, I think, 78 years old. She got COVID, helping a friend that was dying from kidney cancer. She got it by taking him in to get chemotherapy. And so every day, her daughter says, you call me every day. She would call and she said her pulse ox is 70%. How does she look? She looks fine. Is she breathing hard? No. Is she blue? No. Is she confused? No. We're going to treat the patient, not a number. And I said, listen, and every day she would call and tell me if anything changed. She was actually like 68 one time.
Well, I'm diabetic and I'm 49 years old. And my husband didn't get it. He was taking care of me and he didn't get it at all. And he still hasn't got it.
Has he been tested for antibodies?
Yes. No, he hasn't been tested yet.
So maybe he
Antibodies.
did have it.
Maybe. But they took some medicines to me and...
She drank colloidal silver.
Yes.
We took her colloidal silver for a couple of days and she drank it like a shot. And 3 days later, she felt like a champ. So I don't know. But
There's another study in the making
I'm
right now.
telling you, it was expensive.
Anecdotal.
Is this really all about money?
Si lo has tenido alguna vez.
Boy.
And power.
We're going to get a so banned on Facebook.
Yes, and yes. I would say that I can't imagine any other reason
Yeah.
why good people, in one of one of the last videos I did, I criticized Emory. I criticized Piedmont. I criticized Wellstar because they were just going all full force. All our staff has to be vaccinated. I'm sorry. If Emory stands up as the institution known internationally and says this is crap, we know it's crap, there's no medical basis for this, this needs to stop, I believe it stops. But they help perpetuate. And it's all, and I think it all does come down to money. And from what I understand, Emory wouldn't step on any toes because their grants come from, who's that little whiny guy? Fauci. He controls the purse strings of way too many grants. And he can unplug Emory just like that. And so I think it did come down to money and power.
That's pronounced for the French. It's Fauci.
All right, yes, sir.
Is the COVID virus, is it man-made? Do you think it's man-made?
Boy, I am probably on the conspiracy theory list to believe that. There were too many quick answers that a bat in this market did it. How did they know that fast? And so, yes, I believe it came from that lab in Wuhan, from a person.
Before the COVID virus came out, there was a thing on Netflix about this very thing happening before it ever became known. Steve Jobs talked about that.
Yeah, I don't trust him
Well, you say they knew something already.
Interesting.
Work.
Another question on that would be, does the COVID virus have in it characteristics that are not normally found in a virus?
I can't answer that. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
But I mean, it's clearly more aggressive than just a natural change would have occurred. And, I've read a lot of articles from experts that know a lot more about this than I'll ever know that said there's no way this happened naturally. And so
That's what I was wondering.
and that's why I think it moved so quickly, is because it changed so quickly.
My follow-on question was...
Oh, yes, sir.
That's all right. Why are so many hospitals, so many medical facilities, so many doctors behind this vaccine? Is it money related? Is it
I think it is. I think some of it, I talked to some of the ER physicians, and you pick an individual one, some of them are very adamant everybody should be vaccinated, and ridicule patients coming in the ER that aren't vaccinated. Others, there's some doctors in there that aren't vaccinated. This is north side of the side. They admit it to me because they know my position. But, other physicians in the hospital, I don't know. I mean, if they're employees of the hospital, they probably have to be vaccinated, and they have to do what the hospitals tell them. And the hospitals need that Medicare, Medicaid, that federal money to be able to survive. And so,
Well, if they've done the kind of study you have about this, why are they touting the vaccine?
They
They may not have done.
They haven't.
Yeah, they haven't.
Ask a doctor about the chickenpox. I mean, they still give out the chickenpox vaccine, but it's shown to cause more issues than just catching the chickenpox.
yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Can you undo a vaccine?
I wish. I don't know that there's any way to do that. Once it's in there doing its thing, I don't know how to stop
That's
it.
part of your argument.
And that's part of the, and actually, maybe I shouldn't tell you all this, there's a study out now that showed, this is in vitro, this isn't in people, that the RNA, messenger RNA can get into your DNA. And they did it in liver cells successfully. Crap.
And when you do that to a child,
Yeah,
okay, because they're developing, they're still, I mean, the DNA's already there, but you're still developing everything.
right. And so if that gets in there and changes things, who knows what happens down the road? Is it going to, you know, there's some studies that say cancer numbers have gone way up in the past year. And what was the thing about American health, American insurance or something? 40% increase in claims in 1 year.
Wow.
10% is considered catastrophic. 40%. And it's
They
not just
specialize
COVID.
in
It's not
cancer.
COVID deaths.
They specialize in cancer care, isn't that correct?
I don't know.
Okay.
No,
I
this
just
is
knew they were
40%
life insurance.
all cause. It's 40% increase in all cause deaths.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned a connection with the flu vaccine and such. Would you recommend your patients take the flu vaccine, especially right after they've had the flu?
After they had the flu? No. The same thing with the natural immunity. They've got better antibodies than I can provide. Because the flu shot is a guess. You know, we look at what's over in China, what virus, what flu is coming around. They go in and get it, and okay, this is the one we're going to make the vaccine to. If we get it right, it works great. If we get it wrong, we have a lot of flu cases. And so, you know, if someone's already had it, no, I wouldn't get it.
Okay, that's not something that stays in your system though, like the orange.
Oh, I think, as far as what the vaccine does? No, it does not. But the memory from that vaccine will stay in your system.
Okay.
The good part of it, not the bad part. Yes, ma'am.
So would it work similar to COVID? This is not the original question I had, but I'm thinking about what you said. If you have the flu, do you not have some level of immunity to any of the flus that come along? Will you not get it as badly, or?
That's very likely, yeah.
So why would you get the flu shot every year if you've already had the flu at any point?
It's mainly for the people that haven't had the flu. I mean, if someone's had the flu, I'm not going to offer it to them. But
Are there really people in the world that don't get the flu at some point in time?
I don't know that I've had it necessarily. If I did, I didn't know.
Yeah, I just wonder, I just assumed that was one of those things everybody got at some point. I don't know.
Yes, ma'am.
Does the type of blood have something to do with, like, if I'm, let's say, O negative or O positive?
I have not seen really convincing evidence about that. And the thing is, the virus doesn't enter red blood cells, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't see why the blood type would make a difference. Unless that has something to do with clotting, but that would be affecting the bone marrow. Yes, sir.
So this is, I just haven't had a chance to do research on it. If you get the flu vaccine, does that prevent you from getting the flu? Or is it the same as the COVID vaccine, which you can still get COVID, you can still spread it? You just tend to supposedly, well, the earlier strains, not Omicron, just be less symptomatic. Is it the same thing, or does it actually prevent you from getting it and being a spread?
If you get if the vaccine matches the flu coming around,
Yeah.
if you had the vaccine, if you've got the flu, it's going to be minimal. I mean, you may not even realize, you may think you had a sore throat and or a cough for 1 day and that was it.
Are you still a spreader?
No, I don't think there's any evidence to
So then
support
why
that.
did they call the COVID-19 vaccine a vaccine when they were talking about the cases where the viral load on some people with the vaccine, even though they were asymptomatic, they were actually considered super spreaders or higher level spreaders. So they had a vaccine, and yet they were more likely to spread it, and they were the one, but then we're told that, well, if you have a vaccine, you don't have to wear your mask inside, but if you don't, you can't, you have to, when it seems like that everybody should wear it in that case.
Sounds confusing, doesn't it? I think that was the intention. I mean, you're right. If you get COVID, you can spread it. The vaccine, you can still spread it. And that's the danger, because there's people that think they're invincible now.
Why is it called vaccine then?
It's not, it shouldn't be. I agree. I agree with that. Sorry, that was the original question. Yes, ma'am.
I've heard that have you heard anything about it being worse for people of color? Our son is a minister in Denver, and he performed
they blame that on the virus or the vaccine?
Well,
Did they say he had the
they just
virus?
said he, but they wouldn't say that they had anything to do with the vaccine. They will not admit that it had.
Not in Colorado, they
No.
were. But yeah, that definitely sounds like an unlisted case.
Hey, can you get the virus from somebody that had the vaccine? I heard it sloughs off, and that you can actually get the virus from somebody that went and got the vaccine.
No,
That's
because the
not
vaccine
true.
doesn't have virus. It just has messenger RNA. There's no viral component to it, except for that little RNA, messenger RNA strip. And that can't be transmitted.
May be banned for this, but your presentation indicates to me that we are fearfully and wonderfully.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would agree with that. Yes, sir.
Can you speak to, like, I know some people, I know I did do wonder, okay, the genetotoxicity, the biodistribution of mRNA, like how that works. When does it stop? They inject you, your body starts producing the spike protein. When does it stop and where does it go?
We don't know. Great question.
There is no regulator on that. So, and that's part of the problem. I mean, can it slow down, stop, and then start up again later? Sure, why not? I mean, we don't know that, unfortunately. Yes, sir.
The home tests that the government is sending us, are they any good?
I don't like them. I don't recommend them. And even the ones at CVS and Kroger, and I don't trust those either.
Do we even need them?
I wouldn't. If you were having mild symptoms, I've never been tested for the virus. I don't tend to, and I won't have the vaccine either. Yes, sir.
I was reading some article that was talking about whenever you are injected with the vaccine, your body doesn't go through its normal process of, oftentimes when it comes through your nose is where that battle happens, right? It comes through, or it's where it begins. But whenever you put it directly into your bloodstream or into your tissue, your body misses out on all that it does in your nasal cavity to try to really formulate the battle or whatever that it's going to do against this virus. Can you talk about that?
It tries to do it indirectly, and by the messenger RNA, by going into your cell, making the spike proteins, then spitting it out into your bloodstream, your body recognizes that as foreign, and that establishes the immune response by seeing that. So if you try to do it nasally.
No, I'm saying whenever you normally would get the virus.
Oh, yeah.
Right, it's coming into your nasal cavity, and there's a lot of work that's done in your body there that your body doesn't get to experience. So then they said you have elevated response throughout your body with the vaccine, whereas your body would have already been fighting that off. I don't remember all the details, but
It was talking about why there might be a higher nasal load, viral load in vaccinated people before they become symptomatic when they get the virus.
I haven't heard that. But
It was-
like the two responses I mentioned.
It was a medical study.
The upper airway versus the GI. What you're talking about is mostly the GI type response. You know, the antibodies are being formed and the T cells are being formed through the GI tract and in the lungs. It misses the IgA part of it.
and then
there
where
is
it
a
would normally be fighting that off in
Right.
that area, it doesn't have it there because it was put in through your bloodstream. It hasn't developed that. It was very interesting. I don't remember all the details.
And some of the things, speaking of the shot, the fact that they were actually blaming it, the injection must have gone into the bloodstream, and that's what caused the problem. What? Is that how desperate they are to make people buy into this? That's crap. Yes, ma'am.
About the heart damage,
Yes.
if you know someone who had the vaccine, they haven't had the virus, but they're starting to have heart symptoms, should they be going and checking on that?
I would.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, if their heart's building up spike proteins in it, who knows what kind of damage can be occurring. And I'd want to do an echo on them to make sure that the heart's beating as efficiently as it should, because it's the muscle fibers that the vaccine or the virus can damage, and then it loses that ability to pump like it wants to.
And then my second question is there really something to the fact that it affects us mentally after we've had the virus itself?
There's definitely some question to that, yes. There's some evidence of that. Yes, sir.
So is there any supporting evidence for some of the suspension liquids and things like that that they've accused being in the vaccine? Like, I think it's glycophage or something like that. There's some.
As far as having a negative effect?
Well, so some of they say that they've looked into what's in the actual vaccine that's not listed on the label, and some of the chemicals are very dangerous. Is there any supporting evidence to that, or is it just kind of anecdotal so far?
I have not seen anything supporting that, for sure. I mean, what could be more dangerous than the actual vaccine itself?
Fauci.
We don't know, but we don't know.
Exactly. Any other questions? Well, thank y'all very much for coming. I really appreciate it.